trust in media is at an all-time low. It's been declining actually for a few decades, but it really went down in the last few years. And it's never been lower in our history.
This is Dr. D'Souza. You're listening to the podcast for base young Catholics who are willing to give their lives to speak the truth, do good, and defend beauty. I have a very special guest on today, Neil Patel. Neil, you are the co-founder and CEO of the Tucker Carlson Network. So Tucker says, start with the dumb questions first. I'm going to start with a dumb question. What is the Tucker Carlson Network?
It's pretty simple, actually. It's really just the media enterprise Tucker uses to get the word out. So we feature content from Tucker, supplemented with documentaries and other features that we make sometimes with others or sometimes with our in-house team. But mostly it's Tucker's show. And that's something we air 3 times a week on our site, tuckercarlson.com, on our soon-to-be-released mobile apps, on TV apps, and really on every platform. So we're on YouTube, every audio podcast platform, anywhere we can find an audience, we put our show.
So I was intrigued when you guys launched because I knew the podcast. I mean, that's what I'm used to. But then I see, okay, Tucker's launched this other thing that's, I don't know, is it like the Daily Wire? What is it? So what is the vision here with TCN?
Our vision is really to our mission and our vision are pretty similar, which is to tell the truth at scale. That shouldn't be a rare thing. I feel like in America, 2025, that is a rare thing. Tucker obviously built his career in other forms of media, started out as a writer, and then had a long run on television, working for a number of networks, most recently and most famously with Fox News. But we live in a country where it's hard to tell the truth, where there's a lot of lying going on, and we want to build and have really already built a business that gives Tucker the freedom to ask any question he wants of any person he wants without any fear of repercussions from anybody. And the economic freedom to do that, meaning if there's a great interview in Moscow in 2 days, we can get our team on some planes and be over there and have no problems doing it. So it's really just a business enterprise designed to afford Tucker that freedom.
Hey, you say it's rare in American 2025, and I just got to say, man, I don't think it has anything to do with American 2025. I think it's since the fall of mankind in the garden when the devil became the Lord of the world. It's been difficult and rare to tell the truth, and because each of us is broken on the inside, not completely incorrupt, but we need to be redeemed. So what?
Let me say, I definitely agree with that. This is not, the broader phenomena is not brand new. I will say in America, we're supposed to value free speech. We have pretty good history of doing so. It's the very first amendment to our Constitution. It's sort of the core of who we are as a society. And I do think that's eroded in recent years more than even in the past. So I'm not pretending that this has ever been perfect at all. But I do think it's sort of a bedrock American principle that's been eroded in recent years and therefore sort of core to what we're doing.
Yeah, that's an important distinction because now we have, on top of the frailty of human nature, we have just the hypocrisy where we say we're a country of freedom and the reality is far from that.
In America, you can, in general, you could still say things, although even that had been under attack. Some of the regulatory regime around speech has really been amped up, and the repercussions for saying things are greater than they've ever been, depending on what environment you're in. If you're on a university campus, for instance, or if you're a corporate employee, et cetera, et cetera. But beyond that, in modern sort of in the digital age, if you can't reach an audience, if all the platforms that control access to ears and eyeballs are kind of stacked against you, then you may have the theoretical right to free speech, but it's severely restricted. And I think that's what I was sort of pointing to when I said, this is under attack. And I think we hadn't seen anything like the speech codes and the restrictions that all the major platforms had imposed in recent years. And Elon Musk kind of broke that monopoly on speech regulation when he bought X for a really inflated price. And I think all the controversies with Elon aside today, the country owes him a debt of gratitude for that. But I think that helped people like Tucker, like Rogan, like many others who have now massive audiences, probably bigger than mainstream media, but it helped them reach them because you have to find a way to get in front of people. And these platforms were becoming extremely restrictive.
And you're not even talking about what may be the bigger issue, which is people not speaking the truth just out of fear. So there's like a distinction of people who are willing to speak the truth, which is a very small minority. But then there's a much broader base of people who are just unwilling to speak the truth. And so even if we have the protection in theory, which we don't, well, I guess we have it in theory, but we don't have it in practice if people are unwilling to exercise that right.
Yeah, we don't. And actually, we don't even, it's getting a little better now. But at its worst, we didn't even have it in theory. All these platforms had speech codes. They were on the website. You could look them up. And you can't talk about X, Y, or Z, or we will deplatform you. And now, what does that mean to deplatform? If you're in the media business and you spend years building up an audience on a platform, and sometimes even paying advertising to build up that audience, you get more followers. You can do ad campaigns to get those followers. So you really may have even invested in this platform. They can shut you off like that just for saying the wrong thing. So not even in theory did you have a free speech right on a lot of these platforms.
So devil's advocate, is that actually against the First Amendment, given that these are private companies? Do they have the right to control who they do business with, who they host, who they don't?
Yeah, no, I don't think well, if it's purely private action, I don't think there's a very good case that that's a violation of the First Amendment. The First Amendment restricts the government, not private actors. We did have a case, though. Good that you brought this up. Under the Biden administration, many arms of the government, including the White House and Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, were pressuring these social media platforms to restrict speech. And sometimes in very specific cases, they would go on and say, look what Tucker said last night. This should be a violation of your policies. Why aren't you taking it down? So there is an argument that actually there is a government restriction on speech case in some of these situations. But yes, you're right. In general, a private platform, I do believe in that, should have the right to put on whatever they want in their own platform.
That's a very good point you make. So how are you accomplishing the goals that you've set at the beginning through the content that you produce, like in addition to Tucker's personal show?
Well, we're just going out and looking at sort of the landscape of America today. We've had, in my view, and everything I'm saying here with you is just my view, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. The media has been biased towards the left, really, in my whole adult life. But it's changed and it's gotten worse over the years, where it's now not just like a soft kind of bias, but flat out very legitimate stories are just not being told because they don't like the implications of those stories. So we focus on those. Tucker's finding things, finding guests, finding topics that you won't find in much of the rest of the media, and he's exposing things. So, and the entire business model is built around that. And there's a trust with our audience. And I think trust, as far as values go, is definitely the defining value for our company. Trust in media is at an all-time low. It's been declining actually for a few decades, but it really went down in the last few years. And it's never been lower in our history. So people are seeing a world which is changing quickly, a country which is changing quickly, and they're seeing the normal intermediaries fail. So the normal places you would go to get information, people don't know if they can trust them anymore. So they're looking for new avenues to find information. And luckily those are sprouting up, and that's the core of what we're doing.
What's it like working with Tucker?
He's awesome. It's funny. So I have a slightly different situation. Tucker and I have been friends since college, like very good friends, godparents, each other's kids, like.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Close families, and have known each other for many decades now. And so I'm like the worst guy to opine on this because he's a good friend of mine, but I'm telling you the truth. Unlike a lot of people especially in television, his last medium, Tucker's like incredibly normal and incredibly like decent person. That's actually unusual in the TV world. Like people are, it's like one way on camera, and there are many famous cases where TV hosts have been clipped off camera, like screaming at their staff or throwing coffee across the room.
O'Reilly. Yeah, he has some good videos on YouTube.
There's a bunch, not just O'Reilly. But yeah, that was a famous one, but there's so many. And the thing about Tucker is like, he's a good guy, and anyone who gets to know him realizes that. So he's great to work with. And, you could ask our entire staff, most of whom aren't, multi-decade long friends of Tucker's, and they would say the same thing. He's just like, he's easygoing. He's obviously, we want to have a huge show. We want to have a huge impact. So we have real work to do. So it's like, it's a work environment and people have to do their jobs. But is he like, he's easy to predict. He's a very fair person. He's hilarious in person. He's a lot of fun in person. And our staff, loves working with him.
Well, I hope I get famous enough one day to be able to throw coffee mugs with impunity.
I've had, in addition to Tucker, I run a news site called The Daily Caller, and we've hired literally at this point hundreds of young kids over the years. We've been around for 15 years, and I actually founded that company with Tucker also. It's a very different model. It's daily news, sort of a newspaper online. But, because we've hired so many more people at that company over so many years, I've had refugees from so many other media and just tell me the stories about the coffee cups that like went whizzing by their head. So it's actually not as rare as you would think.
Well, I wanted to talk about the Daily Caller, but I'm still on this Tucker kick. I still can't believe that I'm talking to you right now. Honestly, I can't believe that I'm 1 degree removed from Tucker right now. So I've been like consciously trying to restrain my enthusiasm, but I'm a huge Tucker fan.
Love it.
I mean, I don't watch the news. I don't read politics. Like my only avenue to what's going on in 2025 is listening to Tucker's show. That's the only podcast I listen to pretty much. Great. Certainly on a regular basis.
Awesome.
So what is the how do you guys get those guests, and how do you plan? What's the processing plan for that?
Well, a lot of it's self-driven by Tucker. He reads like more than anybody I've ever met, and he's just an extremely curious person. So a lot of times, he will just write in, and we have sort of a show booking group, and led by his former booker from Fox. So we have a lot of the team on our staff that he had with him at Fox. And our lead booker is amazing, and our other booker is amazing, and they're great at tracking people down. But then others are recommended by our staff, either the bookers, the producers, our social media team, people who just watch a lot of media or interact with a lot of media. The whole staff is able to recommend people, and Tucker signs off on who he wants to talk to. I'd say, I don't know the exact number, but a lot of it, maybe more than half, is self-driven by Tucker, and then the others are people that other people on our staff have suggested.
Okay. Yeah, because one thing that's impressive about it is, at least for me, who is not super well informed, I'll find these guests who I've never heard of before, and they have incredible stories.
Yeah, that's the most fun part.
And it's getting it to such a wide stream audience, because some of these people are really well known in the dark web, I guess. But now you get it into the mainstream of the dark web.
Is that where we are? We're the mainstream of the dark web?
I hope so. I hope you're...
it's funny. I love the mix, actually. I love the fact that we can fly across the world, interview prime minister of some country, and the next day it's some Substack author no one has ever heard of. And that Substack author may do better, because that guy happens to be brilliant and is talking about something no one had ever heard before. And this happens a lot. And so I love that mix of like world famous person, one episode, author, writer, the next episode that no one's ever heard of, and it takes off. And so, yeah, it's a cool mix, and it's sort of driven by that process I just kind of went over with you.
So I'm a big fan of reading, especially since we're in a new dark age. So in the previous dark age, purportedly, we got through it through basically preserving reading and writing in the monasteries. What is Tucker's reading plan? You mentioned that he reads a lot. I want to take some notes from this.
Well, he's probably not a guy to replicate in the sense that he has given out his cell phone number to anyone he's met for decades now, and not really did it. And I mean, like the interesting waiter at the restaurant.
That's possible.
The interesting waiter at the restaurant to like some world leader. And
well, no wonder the NSA spied on him. Gosh, this guy is not
like a treasure trove in there. And he keeps in touch with people. And I'm telling you, man, that guy texts with like I don't know, I'm not exaggerating, like 1,000 people a day. It's crazy. But people are sending him all kinds of articles, information, and he just stays plugged in. And also he's now been at this for so long that he just knows a lot of the people who are sort of at the center of things. So, he finds a lot of these guests that I've never heard of, a bunch of them. And a lot of that's self-driven.
Okay. So it's not like he's sitting down with like Aristotle on his lap. It's mostly like getting like up-to-date news.
No, I mean, he reads a lot of books, but
okay.
But no, it's a lot of it's friends of his, people reaching out. Okay.
So what's the deal with his fascination with Christianity? And because I noticed he regularly asks guests, have you noticed that there's a Christian resurgence or revival? Uh, I've noticed that there is just by listening to his guests, but I'm curious about why he's so interested in that.
Well, he's a religious person, someone of faith. I think he has lost a lot of confidence in a lot of our organized religions. I don't think he goes to church regularly like he used to. When he lived in DC, he had a church that he went to with his family every week. I think he's doing less of that. I know he's reading the Bible again, or I don't know how many times, but he's very he's very religious, but not as associated with like an organized church anymore. And then I think he sees it with others around him. We did a live tour during the last election cycle, and we were doing big arenas, and you couldn't help but notice it. There's something going on in the country, in the midst of all, there's a lot of negative surrounding us, but in the midst of that, it's hard not to notice that there's something deeper going on, and there is some kind of spiritual awakening happening. You can feel it. We could feel it on that tour in every city, and I think he's seeing that, and he's feeling that, and he's talking about it because that's what he does.
I felt it. I remember listening to those live tours, and it was powerful. I was so excited to get to the next, and then I was so blown away that Trump was on the last one. Maybe that was predictable. Maybe I should have predicted it, but still, that was really cool.
Well, yeah, it was all really fun and really cool and a unique moment, in time. But sometimes it was super overt. Russell Brand dropped to his knees and said a prayer.
Yeah.
We have a friend who's a minister in Florida, and we brought him out to. He's also a musician, and he would sing, and then he would open the events with a prayer when he was around. So like there was something to it, and it was pretty powerful and amazing.
Okay, so I could go on for a while about Tucker, but let's get to the Daily Caller.
Yeah.
So you described it a little bit briefly. So what would you say is the purpose of it? Why did you found it?
So Daily Caller, I always think of it as a startup. It's been around for a long time. I mentioned 15 years. To me, the biggest problem that conservatives, which is a hard thing to even define these days, but conservatives writ large have had, is communicating to the American people through this broken media ecosystem we have. And with the advent of digital, the barrier to entry for media dropped. So in the old days, if you wanted to start a newspaper, you had to buy these huge, expensive printing presses and have a warehouse and have them all installed. And you had to have a team of kids on bikes throwing, newspapers at houses. It was kind of a big investment and a big lift to get going. Now you just put up a website. You can do that literally in 24 hours if you had to. Probably wouldn't be the best looking site on the internet, but you could get it up quickly. So the concept of Daily Caller was way back when we launched. The Huffington Post had launched sort of midway through the Bush years. And by the end of the Bush years, the Huffington Post had more online readership than the Washington Post. And it was just sort of shocking to me that, this Ariana Huffington was kind of a big deal, like a celeb type, but not like, she wasn't like a national A-lister. This woman starts this news company and all of a sudden has more readership than the Washington Post. And we just wondered, like, why is no one on the right taking advantage?
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few news sites on the right, but they were almost exclusively about opinion writing. And what we really need is our own source of information, just straight up information, like go to events, write down what's happening, interview leaders, ask them questions. And no one was doing that. So the core of the Daily Caller is really just an online newspaper, heavy focus on politics, but it covers current events, business news, some sports, entertainment, everything. So it's really just a digital newspaper and publishing a couple hundred stories, original stories a day now. And it's grown quite substantially from, I think we started with a 20-person staff, and now there's over 100. We have a for-profit Daily Caller and a nonprofit, two separate entities. And between them, there's over 100 people producing a lot of original news. We've been part of the Washington press corps for a long time. So what I mean by that is like on Capitol Hill credentialed and in the White House press room credentialed, going on trips with leaders, asking tough questions. I will say during some administrations, the last one we just had, for example, we had someone in that press briefing room every press briefing. And I think in 4 years, we got 2 questions asked. So there's all this debate now, like Trump's cutting out the AP and everyone's up in arms, but no one seemed up in arms when, the Biden White House absolutely cut us out because they didn't want tough questions. They didn't want people to ask about his, mental capacity, for example, the biggest question probably of that era. And we would have. So anyway, it's a digital outlet just there to balance and give people a source of information that's free of all the bias and I would say outright corruption that's happening in our major media today.
What do your audience numbers look like?
They're pretty big. We're getting like 20 million readers a month. So
wow.
I will say,
congrats.
Thank you. And I will say, going back to our initial conversation about censorship, another part of the censorship is just algorithmic censorship. So the Daily Caller, when we launched, we grew pretty quickly. A lot of that was Tucker. Tucker was part of the company initially. He no longer is. I bought him out of that company a bit ago, but he's great at breaking news. He's great at finding good stories, and he's great at training journalists. So we broke a lot of stories early on in the Daily Caller's existence and grew pretty rapidly. Then figured out what are the things to do to really get good and to reach a lot of people. And one of them is like understanding how Google search works and sort of optimizing your content so that the Google search crawler can read your site well, and you always have up-to-date information on there. And we got really good at that. So at one point we were getting nearly 30% of our readership from just Google search. We also got really good at Facebook, which is a platform that has a lot of older Americans on it, a lot of right of center people on it. And at one point, I think our high was like 25% of our readership was coming from Facebook. All that ended after 2016 election. There was a real pressure on these social platforms to shut down any site that was viewed as, I would say, at all fair to Donald Trump. So we went from 35% Google search to like 1%. We went from 25% of our traffic from Facebook down to 2%. So it changed the whole game and became much more difficult. It's fundamentally unfair. Really not much these are private companies, not much you can do if they want to do that. But it's
but if you said they were pressured, I mean, because that's a big change.
Well, I mean,
if they were pressured from the government.
By the left, I don't have any proof that I don't know, DNC pressured them. I'm sure they did, but I don't have any proof of that. So I'm not saying it was necessarily government coercion, but it was coercion from, the left that was very upset. And 2 options when Donald Trump, a TV host, billionaire comes out of nowhere and takes over the politics of your country. One, you could look inwardly and say, did we do something wrong? Like maybe we should reconsider our policies. Maybe people aren't so happy. That never really that happened for like a split second after 2016, but it was quickly like a search for scapegoats. It was, if you remember back to that era, it was like for a minute, it was like, the Facebook ads that Russia bought, it was like at $200,000 of ads, they say, that swung the whole election, like insanity. The other one was, let's crush any outlet that's giving him a voice, that's being at all fair to him. And so we got caught up in that. So it's been a harder company. It's been harder to grow and to reach audience, but we still do have a big audience.
And what sets it apart from similar outlets like Citizen Free Press or other ones that you may be more familiar with?
I think there's a lot of good outlets. I've never had a competitive view of this, that we have to like crush competitors in order to win. The media is dominated, at least if you look at sort of the finances of the companies or how much investment's gone in, by very left-leaning companies. All the corporate media outlets, ABC News, NBC News, CBS News, CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, all are more left-leaning. So I view it as sort of, those are the corporate or legacy media. And then I view our side as the independent media. And on the independent media side, I think there's a number of good outlets. There's a number of good, purely independent people like Substack authors. But I don't view us as having to compete with any of those. Everyone can grow at the same time. And I think there's other really good ones. But I do think we focus really hard on the basics that everyone should focus on. Try to tell the truth as best you can. It's a complicated world. Sometimes you'll get something wrong. But make the effort. Like really try to tell the truth. Check your facts. And basic things, spell words correctly, just like ask questions, like look at your article. Am I missing something? Is this missing another point of view? Let's add all the points to you. Let the reader decide what to believe or not. Don't try to shove it down their throat. So I think on a quality basis, I think we're doing a good job, but I do think there are others also doing a good job.
How optimistic are you that we can turn back the cultural revolution that has swept in this country and the world?
Man, that's a great question. Um, I I am somewhat optimistic. I think it peaked. I think the crazy peaked. Um, I think a lot of normal people who don't want to be mean and who don't want to get too involved finally hit their limit. Probably post COVID, post all the insanity on everything's about your sexuality or your race. I think a lot of normal people just said this is too much and are pushing back against all that. Um, so I'm hoping it peaked. It seems like it's peaked, but I will say the hard left, and I do think all that stuff is driven by very ideological, very committed hard left activists. I don't think they'll give up. I think they're relentless. So just because I think it's peaked once, that's the reason I'm not answering you completely in the affirmative. I think it's a little better today than it was a few years ago. Will it be better in a few years? I certainly hope so. And I think probably because I think people are more caught onto it now than they were. But I don't know the answer to that.
How optimistic are you that Trump will fulfill his campaign promises? I think my biggest critique of him is that he's not based enough, and I'm starting to get concerned, genuinely. What do you think?
I guess I have two things. One, I think at his core, he has really good instincts. And I think he will push. I also think it's very hard in our system to effectuate change. And to be fair to him and to them, it's harder inside when you see all the everything that needs to be done and balanced. And he's dealing with this Congress that's not super aligned, including the Republicans. I'm almost purely talking about the Republicans. Actually, you can't expect very many Democrats at all to get on board. But it's very hard for him to even bring all the Republicans on board. And you're seeing it in this bill they're trying to pass right now, which is, in my view, extremely imperfect. And there's a lot I can criticize in it. I do temper that a little bit with just knowing that it's so much easier to sort of poke from the outside than get it done from the inside. And I do think he's trying. So I give him a lot of credit. I do think they've accomplished a lot already. I think what they've done on the southern border already has been amazing. There's a lot more in the immigration area I think they could do or wish they would do, but I do think it's been something to laud so far, just tightening up the border. So I think it's never going to be as good as promised, but I think it's, and the other flip side of this is it's definitely, no matter what, going to be 100 times better than a Kamala Harris administration would have. So, that's what I sort of fall back on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to his great credit, he's shown that he's willing to die for his beliefs. And I hope the same can be said of us and of his team members. Well, I'm hoping that there are some things that seem to me could be like relatively easy wins and substantial wins, like just declassifying documents. I mean, maybe I'm just naive and it's like incredibly difficult to do so, but it seems to me that that's an easy win.
First of all, I 100% agree with you. I mean, they talk about the fact that there could be personal information that you need to redact, this and that. I'm a little more open to that argument for some of the very newer stuff, Epstein stuff. There could be minors and, contact information or something. I wouldn't want someone releasing that if it was my kid. So I get that. But when you go back to like the Kennedy assassination, what are we trying to protect at that point? Why shouldn't it just all come out? So, and more came out under Trump than before, but so much was redacted. So look, I think the trust levels in our country, I know, it's just fact. The trust levels in our country, not just a trust in media, which I mentioned, but trust in our national institutions are at all-time lows. And the obvious antidote to that is just to trust the American people more and let them see everything and make their own decisions. It does make you wonder if that seems so difficult, are they just trying to hide something? And it's at some point becomes impossible not to just conclude they're clearly just trying to hide something. So, and Donald Trump put out executive orders very early on saying, release all this stuff, and it's still not out. So why is it still not out? I mean, people are getting upset, and I don't blame them. So yeah, I agree. I wish it would go faster. And if they really do have to be redacting stuff, or that's really what's going on here, they really need to get on it at like top priority, because people are getting frustrated and they're just losing faith in the system. And that's not good for anybody.
I think what the American people need is a fire hose of truth.
Yeah. It does seem like there's a lot of reluctance to let that happen.
So you've accomplished a lot in your career, and I hope continue to do so. Could I ask, what was the biggest challenge you overcame on this journey, and how did you do so?
I would say the biggest challenge was a business challenge. I didn't realize how much institutional obstacles, how many institutional obstacles will be put up. And what I mean by that is there is a real desire amongst those in power in America, who I think have kind of botched things in the last couple decades, to crush independent media. They have pretty good control over the corporate media. They do not like independents asking questions. They do not like our existence, period. And so I don't think I'm horrible at business, but the challenges you have to overcome to run an independent media company in America today, and I hate whining, but you asked me, so I will tell you, they're just amazing. So if you're in the corporate media, you get these huge ad campaigns from Madison Avenue that are, crazy financial levels. And if you're an independent, they're not doing business with you. If you're in the corporate media, you get all the big social platforms eager to work with you, eager to put you in their beta programs and test new things with you, constantly helping you optimize your website. You do not get that if you're on the independent side. There's very little of that. And what you get instead is, constant attacks. So it's difficult. It's just difficult. But it makes it all the more fulfilling because it's needed. People want it. So through all these obstacles, people are still finding a way to come to sites like Daily Caller, certainly to watch Tucker's show. And we're growing, and the rest of the media is shrinking. So it is working, but they definitely put up as many obstacles as they can to try to knock you down.
Well, thank you for what you do. Are there any last words you want to share with our audience?
No, man, it's great. Yeah, I've heard great things about you. We have some common friends, especially Elizabeth, and she was like, "Yeah, you have to go on a show if he asks." So I'm glad we were able to do this.
That's really sweet of her.
And no, I don't think anything else. That seemed great.
Well, to the Virtuous Leaders audience, you've heard a truth speaker here, Neil Patel, who's also a hustler entrepreneur. That's really the core audience here for this podcast. And I want to just highlight one thing he said, which is that there is a cultural and religious resurgence where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. So let's take hope in that. And even if it takes suffering in this life, risking our lives and livelihood, let's keep moving forward. That's how we'll be happier. So thank you, Neil.
Thank you.